Welcome to Ctrl+Talk. This is Anthony and Kate, and today we're going to be taking a deep dive into the EU's, well, you could call it a grand plan, I guess, to really make a splash in the AI world.
Yeah, they're certainly not lacking in ambition, are they? I mean, we're talking about a whopping 200 billion pledge to bolster their AI capabilities. They're really aiming to be a top player, a leading AI continent, as they put it.
It's a bold move for sure, especially considering they feel like they've fallen behind, the U.S. and China.
Hmm.
What really caught my attention was this Invest AI plan. Have you had a chance to look at that?
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating.
And specifically, these AI gigafactories they're setting up.
Yeah, those are interesting.
They almost sound like something out of a sci-fi movie, don't they?
A little bit, yeah. Not that they're building robots or anything, but, well, you know what I mean. Picture these massive data centers crammed with incredibly powerful chips, and these chips are designed for one specific purpose, training those AI models, the really
Sure.
complex ones.
Right, like the one that powers ChatGPT, for example.
Exactly.
But why are these gigafactories so important? Like, why can't they just train these models on regular computers?
Well, it's not quite that simple. These models are incredibly data hungry. They need massive amounts of data and processing power to really learn and improve. Imagine you're trying to teach a dog a new trick, but you only have a few treats. It's going to take a lot longer, and you might not even get there.
Ah, okay. So the EU is basically building, like, the ultimate AI training ground, right?
That's one way to put it, yeah. The goal is to have something like 100,000 last-generation AI chips in these facilities. That's 4 times more than current AI factories have.
Wow, that's a serious commitment to processing power. It really shows how serious they are.
Mhm.
But, and I think this is important to bring up, not everyone is convinced that this is the right way to go. We've actually gotten some interesting comments from listeners over on Slashdot.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them are raising concerns about, well, just throwing money at a problem.
Right.
Will that actually solve anything?
That's a valid point for sure. There have been plenty of government initiatives that looked great in theory, but didn't quite deliver in reality.
Exactly. And some users also pointed out that the EU's track record with tech companies hasn't always been, shall we say, the most welcoming.
Right, the regulatory environment hasn't always been super friendly.
Yeah. So there's this worry that this whole AI push could be a bit of a knee-jerk reaction, to OpenAI's success, fueled by that fear of missing out. And maybe it'll just end up being a case of mismanaged funds with very little oversight.
It's a legitimate concern, definitely.
And it all begs the question, what problem is the EU trying to solve with this big AI investment? Like, what's the ultimate goal here?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's interesting because the answers are all over the place. Some
Yeah.
people are convinced that AI is the key to freeing us from all those boring, repetitive tasks, giving us more time for fulfilling work.
Makes sense.
Others see it as a huge opportunity to boost productivity and efficiency, but they're worried about the impact on jobs. What happens when machines can do our jobs better and faster?
Yeah. And then there are those who see it as a way for the wealthy to, well, get even wealthier, which is a pretty grim outlook, to be honest.
It is, yeah. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. And to make things even more complicated, some folks are questioning whether catching up is even necessary in the first place.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Well, some of the comments we saw argued that these large language models, like ChatGPT, might not be as revolutionary as they seem, at least not in the long run, and maybe their potential for improvement is actually quite limited. They think the EU might be over-investing in a technology that might not live up to all the hype.
So they're worried the EU is putting all their eggs in one basket.
Something like that, yeah. And it makes you wonder, what if they adopted a different strategy? Instead of just trying to catch up, what if they focused on areas where they could really excel? Areas that align with their values and strengths.
Now, that's a thought-provoking idea. Maybe the EU's path to AI leadership isn't about copying what others are doing, but about forging their own unique path.
Right. And that's something we definitely need to unpack further.
Absolutely. But before we go there, I think it's important to compare what the EU's doing to what we're seeing in the US, especially with companies like OpenAI. They've received massive amounts of private funding, which raises the question, what are the real implications of public versus private investment in AI?
Yeah, that's a crucial point. It's not just about the money itself, but the motivations and the priorities behind it. Private companies are obviously driven by innovation, but they're ultimately accountable to their investors and shareholders.
Hmm.
Their main focus is often on developing products and services that will make money.
Whereas the EU, as a governing body, has to consider the broader impact on society.
Right.
Their stated goals include things like ethical development and making sure that AI benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly. It's a completely different perspective. Private companies are driven by market forces and profit potential, while the EU, at least in theory, should be prioritizing the well-being of its citizens.
But the question is, can they actually balance those competing interests? That's something we'll definitely need to explore as we dive deeper into this whole fascinating topic.
Definitely. And as we do, I want to encourage you, our listener, to think about what really stands out to you about this whole EU AI investment plan. Is it the sheer scale of the funding, the potential impact on the global AI landscape? Or maybe it's those ethical and societal questions that have come up.
It's a lot to think about. Just keep those thoughts in mind as we continue our exploration.
Thinking more about this whole public versus private thing, there's another side to consider, the potential downsides of the EU's approach.
You mean like beyond just the whole mismanagement and inefficiency thing that some people brought up?
Yeah, exactly. There's this argument that when governments get too involved in tech, it can actually stifle innovation.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, think about it. Bureaucracy, red tape, the possibility of political influence, all that stuff can really slow things down.
That's true. Private companies can move a lot faster. They can adapt to change more quickly.
Exactly. And then there's this whole question about the EU's focus on ethical development. Could that actually backfire?
Backfire. Wait, I thought that was supposed to be a good thing.
It is, in theory. But some people worry that if the regulations are too strict, it could actually make it harder for European companies to compete, with companies in places where the rules are looser.
Ah, I see. So the EU could end up falling even further behind, even with all this investment.
It's a possibility, yeah. It's a tough balancing act. They want to promote innovation, but also safeguard these ethical considerations. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's like walking a tightrope. One wrong step and the whole thing could fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
But, on the flip side, if the EU gets this right, they could set a global standard for how we develop AI responsibly.
Absolutely. That's the hope anyway. And you can't deny, there's something to be said for having a body like the EU leading the charge on this, rather than leaving it all up to private companies.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's easy to be cynical about government initiatives, but the EU does have a history of setting strong standards in other areas, like data privacy.
Exactly. Think about GDPR. That really shook things up in the tech world.
Oh, yeah, it definitely did. Companies all over the world had to scramble to get in line, so maybe the EU can pull it off with AI too. But going back to something we touched on earlier, a lot of the AI discussion focuses on these large language models like ChatGPT. Is that the only way to do AI?
That's a great question. And it's one the EU should be asking themselves, too. Maybe this whole focus on these gigantic AI factories is too narrow, What if they tried a different approach, one that really plays to their strengths?
Like those other areas we were talking about. Healthcare, education, sustainability. Those are all places where AI could have a massive impact, and they fit perfectly with the EU's values.
Exactly. Imagine an EU that's known all over the world for its expertise in things like AI-powered medical diagnostics or personalized learning platforms or maybe sustainable energy solutions. That's a kind of AI leadership that's both exciting and realistic.
Yeah, it's a different kind of race, isn't it? The goal isn't just about who has the most powerful tech, but about building a better future for everyone.
But let's be practical for a second. Even if the EU changes its focus, they still need to convince the best people in AI to come work for them.
Oh, for sure. That's not going to be easy. Right now, the U.S. is still seen as the place to be for AI. Silicon Valley, all that. The EU will have to offer some serious incentives if they want to lure top talent away.
Competitive salaries, top-notch research facilities, a culture that truly values innovation and collaboration, they're going to have to pull out all the stops.
And even then, it's not a guarantee. Attracting talent is one thing, but keeping it is another. The EU needs to create an environment where AI researchers and developers feel valued and supported, inspired even. It all comes back to that big question, doesn't it? Can the EU really catch up in this AI race?
It's tough to say, honestly. It's too early to tell. They've got the resources, the ambition. They're starting to understand how important AI is. But success will depend on a whole bunch of factors. Some of them they can't control.
It's going to be fascinating to watch it all unfold. It's not just about the EU catching up. It's about how we shape the future of AI so it benefits everyone. Remember those commenters who questioned the whole catching up thing?
The ones who weren't sure about chasing those large language models. Yeah, I remember.
Well, their comments got me thinking, what if, instead of trying to compete with the U.S. on their terms, the EU took a step back and asked a bigger question? What kind of future do we actually want to create with AI?
And how can we use this tech to solve the problems that really matter to us as Europeans?
Exactly. It goes beyond economics or who's got the best tech. It's about our values, our priorities, the kind of world we want to live in.
And that's where the EU has a real chance to stand out. They could be a leader not just in AI itself, but in using AI for good.
But what would that actually look like? How could they really use AI to make a difference in people's lives?
Well, take healthcare. Think about AI that's used to really personalize treatments, improve diagnostics, maybe even discover new cures for diseases.
Mhm.
Algorithms that could analyze your genes and your medical history and predict your risk for certain conditions.
That would be amazing. Early detection and personalized medicine, that could totally revolutionize healthcare.
Exactly. And it's not just about treating diseases, it's about preventing them in the first place. AI could help us figure out risk factors and encourage healthier lifestyles.
That's incredible. And what about education? How could AI change how we learn and teach?
Well, imagine AI systems that create personalized learning plans, ones that adapt to each student's strengths and weaknesses, like having a personal tutor available all the time.
Yeah, we talked about those AI tutoring systems. That could be a game changer, especially for students who struggle in a traditional classroom. It could make education so much more accessible and interesting for everyone.
Right. And for teachers, AI could take care of things like grading, giving them more time for creative teaching and one-on-one help for students.
It sounds like AI could really give both students and teachers the tools they need, create a better learning environment all around. What about sustainability? Could AI help us with all those big environmental problems we're facing?
Oh, absolutely. It could make our cities and buildings so much more energy efficient, reduce waste, and even speed up the development of clean energy.
So AI could be a powerful weapon in the fight against climate change.
Exactly. It could help us monitor things like deforestation, predict natural disasters, come up with innovative solutions to cut down pollution and waste.
These are just a few examples, but they show how much potential AI has to really make the world a better place.
And that's the message we need to get out there. AI isn't just about automation or robots taking our jobs. It's about using tech to help us solve complex problems and create a brighter future for everyone.
Well said. It sounds like the EU has a real chance to lead the way in this whole AI for good movement. But it's not going to be a walk in the park. There will be challenges, setbacks, some tough choices to make.
Definitely. And that's what makes this so interesting to talk about. We're not just talking about technology. We're talking about our values, our priorities, what kind of world we want to leave for future generations.
This deep dive has been full of interesting questions and insights. But before we jump into our final thoughts, let's give you, our listener, a moment to reflect on everything we've talked about.
Think about what really struck you. What questions are still on your mind? Take a minute to really consider these ideas before we wrap things up.
All right, so picking up where we left off, it's worth circling back to those skeptical voices we heard, the ones who weren't so sure the EU needed to be a leader in those big language models.
Right. They weren't convinced that following the US's lead was the best strategy for the EU.
Yeah, their point was maybe the EU's path to success is actually about doing things their own way, not just copying what others are doing.
Exactly, forging a unique approach.
We touched on this before, focusing on things like healthcare, education, sustainability, areas where they can really make a difference and where AI aligns with their values.
Right. Imagine an EU known for AI-powered medical breakthroughs, personalized education, cutting-edge green technology. That's leadership. That's about more than just economics or who has the most powerful tech.
It's about using AI to solve real problems and make a better future for everyone.
And that's where I think the EU could really shine, becoming a global leader in AI for good, as some people call it.
But what would that look like, practically speaking? We talked about some examples, but I'd love to dig a little deeper into how AI could tackle those big challenges, like in healthcare, education, and sustainability.
Well, let's take healthcare. Imagine AI that can analyze huge amounts of medical data to spot patterns and predict outbreaks before they even happen.
That would be amazing. Catching things early, preventing them in the first place, could save so many lives.
And AI could help us personalize treatments, tailor them to each patient's specific needs and their genetic makeup.
So no more one-size-fits-all medicine. AI could make healthcare more precise, more effective.
Exactly. And in education, think about AI creating personalized learning paths, adapting to each student's strengths and
We
weaknesses.
talked about those AI tutoring systems. It's like having a personal tutor available 24/7.
Exactly. And AI could even help teachers by automating things like grading that would free up their time to focus on individual students, on mentoring, on more creative teaching.
It sounds like AI could empower both students and teachers, create a more engaging and effective learning environment overall.
For sure. And then there's sustainability.
Yeah.
AI could be a game changer in the fight against climate change. Imagine systems that optimize energy use in our cities, cut down on waste, even speed up the development of clean energy tech.
AI could help us monitor things like deforestation, predict natural disasters, even come up with new ways to capture and store carbon.
It's about using AI to help us understand and manage our planet's resources in a more sustainable way.
The potential is huge, but let's be real. There will be bumps in the road, right? The EU will have to deal with some complicated ethical questions, make sure people's data is protected, and address concerns about jobs being replaced by AI.
Oh, absolutely. And they'll have to convince the world that their way of doing AI is the right way. It's not just about having the best technology, it's about building trust and showing everyone that AI can be a force for good.
It's a big task, but I think the EU's up for it. They have the resources, the ambition, and they're really starting to understand how important ethical and responsible AI development is.
And most importantly, they have this vision of a future where AI benefits all of humanity. That's something worth fighting for.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive today, we want to leave you with one final thought. The future of AI isn't set in stone. It's a future that we, all of us, have the power to shape.
The decisions we make today, they're going to determine whether AI becomes a tool for progress or a source of division and inequality.
So stay informed, keep asking questions, and demand that AI be developed and used in a way that aligns with our values.
Because at the end of the day, the future of AI is in our hands.
That's all for this episode of Ctrl+Talk. Thanks for joining us. We hope you found this deep dive insightful.
We hope it sparks some new ideas and maybe even a few healthy debates.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep learning.